Good morning, comadres. Welcome
Good
back
morning.
to another spotlight on education. I'm so happy to be here today with Roxanne Nazario, a regular comadre on our show, and our big boss, whoop, whoop, Alma Vargas is here with us. And today we're going to be talking about a champion in Los Angeles, and her name is Tanya Ortiz Franklin. You might have heard her. She's running for District 7 to replace that board member. And we're also joined by her really good friend and candidate cheerleader, Courtney Evo. Really excited to have these folks here. We're just going to start right in because there's a lot to cover. It's a really important race, and it's also really important to get to know why Tanya is a champion and how did she become that champion. So we're going to talk to a couple of people that know about what she's been doing, but I really want to start with Courtney because Courtney has a perspective that's kind of a lifetime perspective. And it's a perspective that not a lot of people will be able to get because she's definitely known her forever. So I want to start with Courtney, but I also do want to quickly have Alma translate a little bit what just kind of the key points of what we're saying. I just sprung that on her, by the way. Um,
Yeah, you sure did.
but I want to make
It's all good.
but I
So,
want to make sure that our Spanish speaking listeners get the same information.
yes, buenos días. Estamos bien contentas que estamos aquí ahora platicando con nosotros las comadres que hemos estado platicando de diferentes temas. Ahora vamos a estar hablando con Tanya Ortiz Franklin, que se está lanzando, es candidata para la mesa directiva aquí del Distrito Escolar de Los Ángeles en el Distrito 7. Y junto con ella estamos con Leticia, que es de San Bernardino, el Inland Empire aquí de California, Roxanne, que es del Valle de San Fernando, yo aquí de Los Ángeles. Y estamos bien contentas que Tanya invitó a su mejor amiga Courtney, que se conocieron, que han sido amigas desde que son amigas de la escuela primaria. Es una amistad muy linda, algo muy bonito, y queremos compartir este tiempo con todos nosotros hablando de este tema tan importante.
So tell us, Courtney.
Okay, well, I met Tanya in elementary school, sixth grade, and she's always been, very driven, super smart. I'm a competitive person, so when she came to the school, I was used to being, one of the smartest. I'm like, who's this girl here? But we became just fast friends, and we, continued our friendship all through junior high, all through high school. We cheered together. We went off to college. She went to New York, to Columbia. I went to school in Florida, and we remained close. We visited each other in college. And when we moved back to, Southern California after graduation, she went into a master's program in education and became a teacher. And I remember I was so impressed because to go to Columbia and then LMU for a master's program and then decide to give back as a teacher in our local middle school, most people wouldn't do that. And then to take it a step further, going to law school at UCLA, most people who go to law school, they want to cash out when they graduate. But she did not do that. She was all about education and kids and equality. And I just, tip my hat to that because there aren't very many people in the world like her that are truly about educational equity and kids and what's best for kids and wanting to give back. And so when she told me that she was thinking about running, I was like, absolutely. There would not be anyone better. There would not be anyone more qualified. And that's why I am going to do everything that I can to try to get the word out there to let people know, politics is really tricky. It can be very, political. So, as a voter, you want to be educated to make the best decision. And, a lot of candidates come in here with special interests and with allegiances to organizations. And she does not come with that. She is truly all about the kids and making decisions. There's no doubt in my mind. she will make decisions with kids first in mind. So that's why I stand behind her. I support her, and I would, urge everyone else to as well.
That's awesome. Alma, if you could just some key points for our Spanish.
Yes. So Courtney y Tanya se conocieron en la primaria, estudiaron juntas en la secundaria, en la preparatoria, mantenieron su amistad en la preparatoria donde fueron porristas juntas, entonces tenían una lealtad muy especial como personas que estaban en el mismo equipo. Estudiaron en diferentes universidades. Tanya se fue a Nueva York, estudió en Columbia. Courtney estudió en la Florida y cuando regresaron, Tanya estudió en la Universidad de Loyola Marymount, aquí en Los Ángeles, donde agarró su maestría y empezó a ser maestra, fue maestra. Y dice Courtney que fue algo muy impresionante para ella porque muchas personas que se crían aquí y que alcanzan a ir a la universidad no necesariamente quieren ser maestras y Tanya regresó para ser maestra. Y luego, cuando fue a la universidad y la Facultad de Leyes en UCLA, estudió las pólizas de educación y que siempre se ha dedicado a la igualdad educativa y que ha estado comprometida con los estudiantes, especialmente con las cuestiones de educación y la igualdad. Y es algo que ha sido muy impresionante para Courtney, porque dice Courtney que hay muchas políticas, muchos intereses especiales, pero que ella sabe que nadie más va a abogar más para los estudiantes como su amiga de toda su vida, Tanya.
Yeah, and what a beautiful story. And you're right. A lot of times we get ourselves educated, and then things happen, and you don't always come back to your community and give back. So it's definitely a major plus when someone comes back and does that. So appreciate that, Tanya. Yeah. So Roxanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about why this is so important and why having an education champion like Tanya is so necessary, especially right now at LAUSD, where I know you've been advocating consistently and showing up on Beaudry Street to give comments. So,
how long do we have? How much time do we have?
I'm almost to answer the question first.
My name is Roxanne Nazario. I am a parent in LAUSD, Board District 6. And I'm also a parent engagement coordinator with a parent advocacy group called Speak Up. And I work with parents throughout the district. So district parents, charter parents, magna parents, all parents. And, right now the issues are really the same. And overall, if I could just sum it up in one thing, the biggest challenge I'm hearing is that parents are not being heard. Parents are not being heard. That is the bottom line. And what that parent might be saying might be different depending on who you're talking to, right? Some people have different concerns. But overall, the number one thing that I see and I hear is that parent voices are not being heard. And we know that to be true within LAUSD. It's a systematic problem that they've had for a while. And so what I'm always trying to do is empower parents, get them to use their voices, but the hardest part is getting the district to listen. If we wanted to go into issues, there's so many different things right now with distance learning and special education children and EL students. I mean, there's so many issues you could go into, but the bottom line is parent voices are not being heard, respected, or even allowed at the table right now. It's the best way I could sum it up.
Dice Roxanne que es una obvia líder aquí de la Comadre, pero que también está involucrada como coordinadora de padres para una organización no lucrativa aquí en Los Ángeles. Y ha estado comparando de que ahorita en esta pandemia hay muchos diferentes temas que están pasando, muchos diferentes problemas que hay con niños, por ejemplo, de inglés como segundo idioma, niños de necesidades especiales, diferentes problemas con la tecnología, y dice que el problema más grande que estamos viendo ahorita es que no hay la voz de padres en el distrito en una manera que se están oyendo, respetando en una manera que ven aceptable. Entonces es parte de el problema ahorita que no hay la respuesta que sería ideal.
You know, that's a theme everywhere. And I want to give a shout out to our comadres from Northern California who are on here. I see you guys. And they're saying that the same thing is happening in Northern California, that parents are not being heard. And so that's definitely a theme that is universal around the state, at least.
And I think, for me, as we get into this conversation, que estamos viendo que este es un problema de los padres, que los padres no están siendo respetados, oídos, incluidos, etcétera, que tenemos una responsabilidad de cambiar eso, y la plataforma de la Comadre es tratando de traer a luz estas voces y traernos a ser más visible. I said that one of the goals of La Comadre is, as we've seen that this is an issue statewide, that we want to make sure that that we use our platform to be more visible and to bring these voices of parents and community members who are concerned about these issues up to the forefront. We really want to make sure that we do that. And I think it's especially important that we talk about Latino and Black children, because we know that Latino and Black kids are the ones that are consistently left behind and consistently. And we're talking about consistency like for decades, that these are the communities that have been the shortest change. These are the ones who don't have access to high quality teachers. We've seen lots of studies about this. We've seen the data that proves it. And we know that there's a lot of institutional reasons why, and racism is a big one, why Latino and Black kids are always at the short end of the stick and are always getting really left behind. So this is something for us that with the right leadership, we can push the types of changes where Latino children will no longer be invisible, where Black children will no longer be disrespected, and that we make sure that we have the right kind of leadership calling for the right kinds of policies to make sure that our kids are protected and getting what they need. And I'll just say that quickly in Spanish, que como hemos visto, este problema es un problema estatal, pero también un problema institucional, que queremos asegurar que los niños latinos y los niños afroamericanos que tienen prioridad, porque ahorita vemos que por décadas no han sido priorizados, no han tenido los recursos que necesitan, que los niños latinos los ven como invisible, los niños afroamericanos los ven como no importante. Entonces nosotros sabemos que esto es un problema de liderazgo y es un problema de instituciones. Y por eso es importante que tengamos los líderes que van a pelear y abogar para nuestros niños. Y nosotros aquí en La Comadre estamos comprometidos en asegurar que eso es parte de lo que nosotros vamos a hacer para nuestras comunidades. And then I dropped my case.
and you know, I was going to add, and honestly, and that's why I wanted to be here today, because I always want to bring a parent voice to the table and try to include not just mine, but other parent voices as well. And that's why Tanya being here is so important. So if I have an opportunity to sit down with a candidate, with somebody who, you know, may be our next board member to replace who is currently our board president in a seat where he's holding that, is so important, because just the fact that she's here joining us is huge, because there are so many candidates that won't do that are not reachable, that are unattainable. Incumbents, that goes for as well. They only talk to certain people. They don't talk to the real parents on the ground. And right now, parents are playing a bigger role than ever in distance learning. I'm calling us, you know, co-educators somewhat. And, you know, not that I am a teacher, but I'm here having to help my daughter and work full time. And it's important just to have somebody to sit down and join us in this conversation. So I really appreciate her being here and speaking on behalf of other parents who I know are also excited to see you here, just having this conversation with us. So thank you.
In Spanish.
And I just can add to that, I'm a parent as well. And like you said, there's a lot at stake, you know, with our kids and education. And we need to make sure that we have leaders that are collaborative and that won't just listen to the teachers or won't just listen to other, you know, leaders in the district, that will listen to parents and that will really listen to the community and that will put kids truly first. There's way too much at stake. And you said something about policy, and that's just another feather in Tanya's hat. Like, she knows about policy firsthand, the work that she's done in nonprofits, really helping that to make sure that all students are heard and that kids that are not represented have representation. So important. And I agree with you, her being here, you know, other candidates wouldn't do this. And what does that say about those candidates? We really have to think about the down ballot and do our due diligence and research. So I appreciate you guys having this forum.
Thank you. Yes, estamos muy contentas y todos, Roxanne, Courtney, nosotros hablamos de que es importante tener líderes que pongan la cara, como decimos en nuestra comunidad, que den la cara y que sean presentes y que estén presentes en poder hablar sobre los diferentes temas que son importantes. Y especialmente ahora, donde los padres están jugando un papel tan grande, mucho más grande que lo han jugado en el pasado. Y ahora por eso estamos muy contentas que Tanya está con nosotros y que vamos a platicar más a fondo de ella, su liderazgo, su visión y lo que ha hecho en su vida para llegar a este punto de ser una líder latina en este nivel. So, Tanya, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Good morning, buenos dias. And thank you for the translation. I think it's so important that families have access to conversations. So lifted up right now in this moment, just hearing from you all, calling in racial justice, calling in parent voice, and making decisions with those who are most impacted by those decisions. I'm really excited to be running for an important seat in the district where I was a student, and yes, got to meet Courtney and grow up with her and so many other wonderful kids that graduated from LA Unified. I was so blessed to be a teacher in the district for 5 years before I was laid off in the last Great Recession, which, you know, is on the table in the future. Big budget cuts are going to be a part of the conversation, and we have to be prioritizing our highest need kids, our Latinx kids, our Black students, our special education students. You all have been speaking to equity, and that is absolutely what I've been working for my entire career. As Courtney mentioned, I went to law school and have been working at the Partnership for LA Schools for almost 9 years, really supporting schools around school culture, restorative justice, fair funding in South LA and Watts. District 7 is really diverse, from MLK in the north down to San Pedro in the south. There is so much richness to our community, and for the last 20 years, our district has been represented by white men from San Pedro, and there's a lot of bias that comes with that, right? We are really at a national reckoning with our decisions and how conscious and unconscious biases come out in institutional decisions and individual decisions. And so I'm really excited to take on this journey to be a leader alongside others who have been in this movement long before I was, who will continue long after I'm here, for that racial justice, for that educational equity for the kids that most deserve our institutions to really center them. So happy to answer questions. So happy to be with you all today, and just grateful for the opportunity to build more relationships with parents and with our community that cares really deeply about the kinds of decisions facing our kids' futures.
Tanya, since a huge part of the conversation is about parents and their voice, I want to talk with you a little bit about how you can help improve that that aspect. And also, I want to point out that sometimes we hear in education that the parents are not involved.
Before we go, Letty, before we go there, can I just quickly translate what Tanya said?
Oh, yes.
It's very important, and I want to make sure that the Spanish speakers hear. So, cuando Tanya se presentó, estaba hablando de la vida su vida, su experiencia, que después de la Facultad de Leyes fue maestra por 5 años en el distrito escolar, obviamente donde ella estudió, donde ella se crió, y después cuando hubo, no sé si se acuerdan, pero hubo una época donde tuvieron que dejar ir muchos maestros en la recesión hace como 10 años, Tanya, it was like 10 years ago, yeah, like, hace como 10 años, cuando se vio pues la crisis económica, dejaron ir a muchos maestros, entonces en esa época ella perdió su trabajo. Y está diciendo que por esa misma experiencia que ahora estamos viendo con esa crisis económica, que también eso ahora es una cosa que vamos a tener que va a estar en la mesa. Pero el distrito donde ella quiere representa una área muy grande de San Pedro hasta Watts, y es una área muy diversificada, donde hay personas de muchas diferentes razas, de diferentes economías, clases sociales, y que ella por casi 10 años ha estado trabajando en una organización que se llama Partnership for LA Schools, que es donde ha estado enfocada en diferentes recursos para estudiantes y también ayudando. Y quisiera que hable más sobre su trabajo en justicia restaurativa, porque es un tema muy importante que necesitamos hablar más de eso. Le voy a preguntar que hable de eso más. Y también que ha estado haciendo ese trabajo, pero que ese distrito en particular, el distrito 7 de Los Ángeles, por los últimos 20 años ha estado representado por un hombre anglosajón, y que sabemos que muchas veces sus ideas de racismo, o en inglés es un tema que se llama implicit bias, que es un I don't even know how to translate, no sé traducirlo, pero es básicamente el racismo que está como entregrado en nosotros, que ni sabemos que lo tenemos adentro, pero que sale, que eso es algo que muchas veces sale en las pólizas que se están haciendo, y que por eso es importante que tengamos representantes que entiendan las necesidades de las comunidades, y quién mejor que alguien de la comunidad que tiene esas experiencias. Entonces es parte de eso que por la primera vez una de 2 latinas van a ser elegidas en este distrito, y que es algo muy, muy contenta para nosotros. Entonces, Leti le estaba empezando a preguntar a Tanya un poco más de esto, entonces, pero quería pues traducir ese tema tan importante de Tanya, de su experiencia.
Thank you, Alma. I appreciate that so much, because I know that there are a lot of people listening that speak Spanish. So getting to just talk a little bit about parents, and how sometimes for a parent, it might feel like they're pushed away from the table.
Yeah.
And then that kind of gives the district or other partners that are in education, the right, they feel, to say that the parents are not involved. But I think Roxanne, Alma, myself, we all know here that that's actually not the case. A lot of parents want to be at the table, but there's a lot of reasons why they feel pushed away from it. So how can we work to, and in your district when you get elected, how can we work to make sure that these voices are brought in?
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for speaking it into existence when I get elected. I think there are a lot of barriers that are outside of the school district's control, and there are a lot that are within the school district's control, right? And so particularly right now, when a lot of families are struggling with jobs and housing and health access, there is definitely a need for better relationships between the school district and other governmental agencies that can support our highest need communities. And yet there are a lot of things within the district's control, like you were saying, how we structure our decision making, right? So in physical physical working and learning before the pandemic hit in March, folks had to trek down to Beaudry and wait for 4 hours for public comment, at which point lots of board members would need to use the restroom or talk to their staff member. I've been there. I've watched it online. I've been there in person. And that is so dismissive. And it's so hard to wait for hours. I've been an advocate alongside educators and parents outside, waiting in the heat, trying to get inside, waiting for your 2 or 3 minutes of allotted time, just to see someone not able to spend those 2 to 3 minutes really listening to you. And so while I think the Brown Act, which governs how public meetings happen, has some good intentions about trying to listen to folks, it's not the only thing we should be using, right? And so for the last several years at the partnership, I worked on the local control accountability plan community engagement process, right? And even to some extent, that was tokenized in my perspective. There were some surveys sent out, there were some community spaces, and yet in a district with over 600,000 students and over 700 square miles, we are so vast that community engagement can't be boiled down to just a couple thousand people filling out a survey or participating in one community forum. It has to be an ongoing conversation, and there's a lot of ways to do that. Some of the things I've been able to do in my day job that I hope to translate as board member, but welcome lots of ideas about how to do this really well, are advisory boards, listening sessions, and just being on campuses, right? Go to coffee with the principal, or now via Zoom, right? Be in the spaces where parents already are, instead of hiding, behind closed doors or not responding to emails or any of the other sort of communication barriers we put up between elected officials and school board members. And so, a lot of folks will say, I have an open door policy. And then to your point, you try to reach out to them and they're not responsive. My hope is that during the campaign trail, I'm able to show how I absolutely do want to be a partner alongside parents making decisions, that are best for your students and your kids, because you're absolutely right. There isn't a parent that doesn't want the absolute best for their child and doesn't want the school district to do everything in its power to make sure that their child can accelerate their learning during the day and then their career and their life path once they graduate from our district. I haven't met a parent who doesn't care. They don't exist.
Tanya, would you like for me to translate, or would you like to say those which you said?
My Spanish is not as good as it should be, and your translation is on point. So I would really appreciate it. Thank you, Alma.
Okay, sure. So, parte de lo que comentó, la pregunta era tocante cómo podemos asegurarnos que los padres y las voces de los padres están incluidas en una manera que es real y en una manera que es inclusive. Parte de lo que está platicando Tanya es de la importancia de no solamente tener involucramiento de los padres para los pocos padres que pueden ir al distrito escolar para dar sus testimonios o sus quejas en el modo de enfrente de la mesa directiva cuando es al fin de la junta, es solamente por 2 minutos, es una manera que realmente no respeta el tiempo de los padres y que no respeta las ideas de los padres. Entonces, parte de lo que ella ha visto en su trabajo profesional es parte de algo que se llama Local Control Accountability Plans, que es unos planes de accountabilidad local, que es un proceso estatal, pero básicamente es de tratar de involucrar a los padres, pero que ella ha visto que muchas veces solamente mandan encuestas a la casa y esas encuestas son, por ejemplo, de 2,000, 3,000 personas, pero el distrito son de 600,000 y más estudiantes. So, unas encuestas de 2 o 3,000 personas no es realmente representante de las necesidades o las opiniones o las ideas de los padres. Entonces, una de las soluciones que está identificando Tanya, que ella cuando sea parte de la mesa directiva, es que ella quiere tener sesiones donde pueden escucharse, ella quiere tener sesiones con los directores de las escuelas, quiere tener sesiones donde están ya los padres en una manera donde los padres son oídos y respetados y incluidos en ese proceso educativo. Okay.
I wanted to add something that actually tied in exactly when you talked about standing outside, waiting in line. I feel that I feel that. As a parent who regularly goes down to the board and speaks consistently over the last 4 years, I've gotten there at 6 a.m. I've gotten there in the peak of the heat. I've gotten there to be not be able to get comment because other special interest groups have gotten there before me. You know, so I really feel that. And when it comes to board members getting up and walking away when you're speaking, especially when you're calling them out on something, I have actually had the board member who is in this seat now, Richard Vladovic, you know, walk away and ignore me when I'm talking to him about something that he specifically did. So I really, really, really feel that. But something else that I've also heard from parents, you know, before I knew you and met you, I heard what an amazing champion you were from parents in your district. And one of the things that's been brought up that I would love for you to talk about, because I don't think most people know, is something called disruptive persons letters, DPLs. And that you were pioneering this work because what you guys found was that Latino parents were receiving these more than other parents about their children being disruptive, when really it was because the parent was trying to voice some concerns and complaints. So I'm not an expert on it, but I'd love to learn more about it. I've heard about it from parents in BD7 talking about your work, and just so parents have a little better idea of some of the systematic problems that are currently taking place in LAUSD.
So I'm going to translate that before Tanya answers it, okay? So, parte de lo que estaba comentando Tanya, que se me fue la onda y no lo traducí, so I'm sorry, era de que una de las de los problemas que se ven cuando los padres de familia van a la mesa directiva es que los que están en la mesa directiva, incluyendo el que está actualmente, que Tanya lo va a reemplazar si y cuando es elegida, es el doctor Vladovic. Y que muchas veces el doctor Vladovic muy conveniently, how do you say conveniently in Spanish? Con mucha conveniencia, cuando un padre de familia como Roxanne en este caso estaba queriendo dirigirse a él se levantaba y básicamente la ignoraba, la dejando hablando ahí sola. O se ponía a hablar con alguien de su equipo, no poniéndole la atención que un padre se merece. Entonces, Roxanne estaba diciendo que ella lo ha vivido en carne propia, que ella lo ha vivido. Entonces, como ha sido su experiencia, dice, gracias por decir que eso está pasando porque a mí me ha pasado. E inclusive a mí también, Alma Márquez, me ha pasado. So, yo sé que es algo real, que muchas veces cuando estamos abogando para cosas que quizás otros intereses políticos no están aliados con lo que nosotros queremos, que es lo mejor para los estudiantes, que nos hacen así, no nos quieren hacer caso. Entonces, por eso nosotros necesitamos a alguien que nos va a hacer caso, y por eso queremos a alguien como Tanya en este puesto, por ejemplo. Ok, ese es punto y final. Pero la pregunta de Roxanne es que ella, antes de que Tanya se ha lanzado para esto, había sabido del trabajo de Tanya. Entonces, el trabajo de Tanya, hace mucho tiempo estaba ella lanzando un proyecto que es un proyecto sobre las cartas and it's parents, disruptive parent letter.
It's actually, yes, DPLs.
Okay, so era la carta de padres disruptadores, o básicamente los padres que estaban quejando, les estaban escribiendo cartas diciendo, no puedes hacer esto porque tú estás causando problemas, cuando los padres estaban solamente abogando para sus hijos. So, cada padre que estaba levantando la voz, los querían hacer menos con esta carta, algo público, algo en escrito, que es algo mucho más formal, de tratar de hacerlos menos, y Tanya estaba haciendo trabajo para abogar para ellos. Entonces, Roxanne conoce a muchos padres que han trabajado con Tanya con esto, y le estaba preguntando que si por favor nos puede decir un poco más de esto, porque yo, por ejemplo, no había oído de esto, y quiero saber más del trabajo de Tanya en eso.
So just really, really quickly, I just want to say that La Comadre has had a blog since 2015, and we actually covered it in our blog in 2016, the disruptive letter. Lily Gonzalez, one of our comadres, she wrote about it, and so I cannot believe it. But yes, Tanya, tell us.
Yeah.
No, thank you
Okay.
for asking. And I should say,
Letty, can you translate that really quickly? Should we just
Lo que
that?
estaba diciendo es que la comadre también tiene blog y en 216 nosotros ponemos un blog sobre la situación que los papás estaban recibiendo estas letras del distrito. Y estoy preguntando a Tanya para que ella explique más lo que pasó allí.
Yeah, so it's an issue, I should say, lots of parents lift it up first, right? So everything that happens in LA, I feel like happens in coalition with educators and students and parents. And there are a ton of community groups who for years have been working on better relationships between schools and families, in particular when it relates to school discipline, or as you're hearing now, kind of parent discipline or person discipline coming on campus. And so the work of Comadre, for example, Community Coalition, there are so many who have been working alongside their students' families, really uplifting the experiences like this disruptive persons letter, which I probably heard about it around 2015 as well. There was a public records act request to figure out how many had been issued and where and along what racial lines, because absolutely we can anticipate, and the evidence showed, disproportionate letters in communities where there are higher need and where there are more Black and brown folks. And so the term itself is so frustrating because my work around restorative justice has really thought about vocabulary, and we would not label students, and even though we still have some work to do on the district systems, but we try not to call students the combatant, which is a word I've seen before, or the instigator, the perpetrator, like these kinds of labels we would hear in the criminal justice system or injustice system, for example. And so to call someone a disruptive person is frustrating, and labeling a person as opposed to behavior is like the first thing that bothers me about this term. But the letter can be issued from a school leader to anyone who has come onto campus and caused a disruption, and that can be interpreted really subjectively. And often it happens when families are very emotional about something that happened to their child. And I'm not yet a parent, but I understand emotion and passion, and how in our white supremacist culture, when someone is expressing their passion and anger and frustration, that can be perceived as unwelcome and threatening in some instances, right? When really it's just an act of love and a misunderstanding or a lack of training about how to engage with different emotions when different cultures, take on a situation. They're not always, calm and peaceful and sort of as you would want from a sort of white supremacist, like, let's just be quiet and less passionate, less angry, less frustrated, when maybe something really bad happened to you and you have every reason to be angry and loud and frustrated. So that's already a lot to translate, Alma, but I'll just say there has been an effort from the district to reduce the number of these, because what it says is, here's what happened, and now please don't come back to campus for an entire year. Not the end of the school year, not a couple of weeks. And there's an assumption that there has been some escalation and some attempts at intervening and supporting in ways that are, good for the kid, good for the family. But there's not real understanding of what has actually happened to, cause this letter to be issued, and then what can be done to take back the letter. And if we're really talking about restorative justice in schools, and I can explain a little bit more what that is, but it's essentially that you're working on a behavior and hearing from all sides about what's underneath that behavior. What are the feelings? What are the needs? How do we come to an understanding across lines of difference and across challenges to find solutions in the best interest of those who are most impacted? And usually that's the kid, right? Because if your parent can't come to parent conferences for a year, it's the kid that's suffering, right? So I'll pause there.
my new, that's going to be my new tagline. Alma, you're on mute. Y'all just don't know. Um, so, so I'm going to translate because there was a lot. So I'm going to translate as best I can. Voy a traducir lo mejor que pueda porque fue mucho lo que compartió Tanya, pero lo esencial es lo siguiente. Tanya en su trabajo estaba viendo basado con otras organizaciones comunitarias como Comadre, Community Coalition, que estaban haciendo trabajo con cuestiones educativas, con la igualdad educativa en diferentes áreas. Y varios padres de familia estaban recibiendo estas cartas, el Disruptive Parent Letter, la carta para, o Persons, Disruptive Persons Letter, que era una carta para las personas que estaban causando problemas. Pero básicamente esta carta estaba siendo mandada, le estaban estudiando dónde están mandando estas cartas a los padres de familia cuando, por ejemplo, estaban agitados, enojados, algo emocional con lo que estaba pasando con sus estudiantes en las escuelas. Y un director o una directora de las escuelas tiene el derecho de mandar estas cartas a ciertos adultos de familia, donde les pueden negar estar en la escuela por un año, no un mes, no 2 semanas, no hasta el fin del semestre, pero completamente por un año, negándoles básicamente a muchos padres de familia la oportunidad de ir a abogar para sus hijos, de ir a Parents Back to School Night, de ir a recibir los recursos que cada uno de nosotros como padres podemos agarrar. Pero básicamente cuando estudiaron dónde se estaban mandando estas cartas, eran a comunidades de bajos recursos, eran de comunidades no anglosajonas, sino afroamericanas y latinas. Son muchas de la mayoría de los papás que estaban recibiendo estas cartas eran padres latinos y afroamericanos y estaban recibiéndolos en una manera que era como otro ejemplo de racismo institucional, de que eso era un ejemplo de que no querían que los padres latinos y afroamericanos estaban o estuvieran abogando por a sus hijos. Entonces, empezaron a crear y que Tanya está diciendo que sobre los últimos años hemos visto un cambio. Nosotros en la Comadre, Leti habló de esto, escribimos de esto, hicimos un blog de este tema cuando empezamos a ver qué estaba pasando a un nivel más grande, pero que ahora el distrito escolar está cambiando eso, pero Tanya con su liderazgo quisiera hacer más de esos tipos de cambios de justicia restaurativa. And I want to make sure I translate that part right, Tanya. It's restorative justice, justicia restaurativa. So, justicia restaurativa básicamente dice, si el niño, por ejemplo, se está portando mal, está siendo disruptivo, está gritando, está haciendo algo, la justicia restaurativa dice, ¿por qué es que el niño está portándose así? ¿Por qué se está portando mal? ¿Qué es lo que está pasando? En vez de solamente acusar o identificar al niño como un niño malo o como un estudiante que está siendo combativo, está siendo un perpetrator, que en inglés es como que es el que está empezando el pleito, right? Que están, en vez de usar palabras así que denotan que es algo negativo, que muchas veces esas mismas palabras se usan cuando están mandando a los niños a las prisiones o los jóvenes a las prisiones, es de cambiar el lenguaje, y es parte del trabajo que ha hecho Tanya, de cambiar la manera en que el lenguaje se usa para usar lenguaje que es más positivo y que no está haciendo igual a los niños que están teniendo quizás unas batallas en las escuelas o están teniendo unos problemas en las escuelas, y no ponerlos en la línea de ir a la prisión, sino cambiar eso para que haya escuela para escuela y no escuela para la prisión, para mandar a los niños a la prisión. So, eso es parte del la justicia restaurativa, que muchos de nosotros hemos estado abogando por eso, pero Tanya ha sido una campeona en eso. And you really have been a champion, Tanya. And I've said that privately before, I've said it publicly before, and it's so important that our community understands that these kinds of policy changes are changes that happen over time, but they only happen when people are pushing for them. And we have leaders who hear us pushing for them, not leaders that are going to walk out, or what Roxanne said earlier, who won't even take calls from people if you don't have a 310 phone number area code. You know what I mean? Like, let's just be real. And when I say 310, I'm talking about people who normally have access are people who have 310 numbers from the West Side, right? Those are the people whose phone numbers will be answered. And I'm saying, like, we deserve leadership who's going to take phone calls from all of the folks who have either children in LAUSD, have a vested interest in succeeding, in those children succeeding, and really care about what's happening to us as a region, because the schools are totally connected to the economic viability of our region and our state, and it's like totally connected. It's absolutely totally connected. Para mí, lo último que dije es que es importante que tengamos estos tipos de líderes, porque muchas veces los líderes que están en las mesas directivas solamente aceptan los números, las llamadas de las personas que tienen el 310 como en su teléfono, que son los que viven en el oeste. Y muchas veces las otras comunidades no reciben ese tipo de atención, ni responsabilidad, ni respeto, digo. Entonces, para mí es importante que veamos esto como un problema no solamente de las escuelas, pero una oportunidad de ver cómo las escuelas impactan a nuestra economía local y cómo también impactan a la economía del estado de California. I mean, están sumamente incluidos juntos.
Yeah. And if I could just add a little bit, part of why I have, and thank you for calling me a champion, I'm like growing into that, right? Why I've been so connected to the restorative justice work is, yes, on the advocacy and the policy change, but it's really the implementation. And so I was a teacher, I mentioned, for 5 years, but for nearly 12, I've been a teacher educator. So I lead professional development, I coach on classroom instruction, and that's where the rubber meets the road. We can have whatever we want on paper, but if educators don't have the time to practice new skills and to get feedback on trying something new, then whatever we say at the district level is not actually impacting kids. And so that's what I've spent literally thousands of hours doing, is sitting in circle with teachers, with parents, building skills, practicing, and then observing during learning time and giving feedback on how it's going and how we're implementing the policies so that kids are treated fairly, but also that teachers have the time to grow themselves, because it's not like you just read something and are able to do it the next day. Adults are learners too.
Very important point. And you said for the last 12 years you've been doing that?
Yeah, professional development. I started when I was a second-year teacher on different topics, on how to teach English, how to teach history, but on restorative justice since 2014.
So, por casi 12 años, Tanya ha provido educación para las maestras y maestros, ayudando a poder implementar las pólizas. Porque si estamos hablando de la justicia restaurativa, es muy diferente leerlo en un libro, pero cuando uno lo practica, cuando uno lo enseña, es importante. Eso es como el cambio ocurre, es cuando las personas lo están implementando. Y el trabajo que ha estado haciendo Tanya en educar a maestros como coach es bien importante, porque es como se implementa ese cambio. No solamente a nivel de la póliza, y los maestros que pueden crecer, porque los adultos también somos estamos aprendiendo. So, cuando los maestros están aprendiendo, los estudiantes son los que ganan en esa situación.
Awesome. So somebody had a question, and it's a legitimate question. Where do these policies come from? Who makes these policies? I think we should address that for a quick second.
So how does any policy happen? It can come from an elected official. I think the best policies come from community, right? Community knows what community needs. And yet it often feels adversarial when you have a great idea from the community and you have to shift the hearts, minds, and dollars of those who get to make decisions. And so, for example, the restorative justice policy came with our school climate bill of rights, with Monica Garcia, who has been a real mentor of mine for the last several years, and she wrote the resolution with a lot of community voice. So the groups that I mentioned before, and also Public Council and ACLU and Inner City Struggle, folks who have been working alongside students and families for decades, often in LA, asking for the things that make schools feel safer, happier, healthier, more productive, so that we are more holistic in our learning, right? And not only reaching towards an SBAC score or high school graduation, which are very important, but also thinking about the skills that support you to get there. And that includes social emotional learning, health and wellness, and just seeing our humanity in each other and celebrating our diverse identities and seeing that as a good thing, right? Not something to suppress and acculturate or assimilate, but to really celebrate our diverse histories and recognize the humanity across lines of difference, is, again, coming from community. Suggesting to board members to bring forth resolutions is one way that policies get made. And then lots of policy gets made through the superintendent's office and all of the various departments who write bulletins and memos. But folks often ask this, like, what's the role of a school board member? And it should be like very simple, which is hire and fire the superintendent, who has this whole team that works on the various issues that we want to get better at, and then to balance the budget. And the budget is a reflection of our values, and where you put your dollars is where you do the work. And so there's a lot of nuance that comes in there, but it's really about, choosing the leader and making sure the budget reflects our values.
Sure.
La pregunta de Leti era que cómo es que empiezan las pólizas, cómo es que se crían las pólizas, y la respuesta corta es básicamente muchas veces las pólizas son hechas por diferentes personas, pero que pólizas como la justicia restaurativa ha sido una póliza que vino del trabajo de muchas organizaciones y personas que estaban trabajando por and remind me, Tanya, the Student Bill of Rights?
Oh, School Climate Bill of Rights.
Okay, que es el clima de escuelas, los derechos del clima de las escuelas. Entonces, ese fue un trabajo de que básicamente la otra, la líder que ha sido una campeona también, Mónica García, que estaba en la mesa directiva, ella fue la que presentó la póliza para este trabajo de llamar la atención a la justicia restaurativa y ver a los niños y ayudar a los estudiantes en una manera positiva, donde los niños son felices, donde están aprendiendo en una manera positiva y no solamente yéndolos en una manera negativa. Entonces, muchas veces el superintendente es el que hace las pólizas. Muchas veces vienen con el equipo que representa y que se reportan al superintendente. O sea, las pólizas vienen de diferentes maneras y diferentes ramas, por decir. Pero lo que sugiere Tanya es que hemos de tener más pólizas que vienen de la comunidad, porque la comunidad tiene muchas ideas que pueden ser mejor para los estudiantes en una manera holística, que puede ayudar a los estudiantes de una manera comprensiva.
And honestly, how do I know that policies are working? Is I get to go into classrooms, I get to talk to teachers. I ask Courtney all the time, I'm like, what's Caleb doing in school? And then she tells me, and I get to hear the parent perspective too.
Ya, y también que uno sabe, ella sabe cómo se están implementando las pólizas por ir a las escuelas y ver cómo están implementadas, pero también que le llama a su comadre Courtney y le pregunta cómo está estudiando Caleb, que es su hijo, en las escuelas, cómo está aprendiendo de esto. Ella agarra información de padres de familia y de ir a las escuelas también para recibir información.
That direct link is so important.
Tener esa conexión directa es una clave muy importante.
I think there's another question in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to take it, Leticia. It's about student leadership.
SEL.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's a parent, I think it's a parent, or it's a comadre, and she's talking about how SEL needs to be pushed more right now, like that we teach SEL in the morning and that moms and caregivers are listening. So it's kind of a question, maybe a comment, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Crisis causes us to think really deeply about what we care most about. It really surfaces our values and maybe our best selves, maybe our worst selves, but hopefully our best selves. And I have been so grateful that there has been an emphasis on social emotional learning since we've gone to distance learning, in large part because just so much is happening in our world and we have to take time to check in. And it's been work that I've been doing at the partnership for a while. But when we say social emotional learning, we refer to some skills that you build. So are you aware of your emotions? Can you choose to manage them in different ways, given a set of skills that you're practicing? Maybe like mindfulness has been really popular, or even identifying what your feelings are and what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So that's goal setting, right? And time management. But SEL is also about social awareness and relationship building. And that's been huge during this time, not being able to see each other face to face. People are finding creative ways to still build healthy, meaningful relationships. And in LA, that has to be across lines of difference, right? So it comes back to kind of full circle of what we mentioned in the beginning. Black-Brown solidarity in particular in LA is a continued relationship, not just person to person, but groups of people and institutions of people coming together. And so absolutely, I think there's a lot we can and should be doing, but we've grown a lot in social emotional learning, I think, just over the last 6 months. And the sort of unfortunate piece is what gets measured is what's valued. And so we don't have social emotional learning standards for the state of California or an assessment for them. We have a survey, and there are many ways by which students can demonstrate those skills. It shows up in their, assignments. It shows up in portfolio projects. It shows up in everyday interactions. But I think there is a lot of work to do about how we value social emotional learning and put resources to demonstrate that value. I get nervous when people say, let's assess SEL skills, because we know there's a lot of feelings and challenges that come with more assessments. But we do want to, put our money where our values are. And often that is in what gets measured. And so we have some more work to do around that.
El aprendizaje emocional y social es algo que es algo muy importante para Tanya. Está explicando que desafortunadamente muchas veces no se pone el valor en eso, de ver, por ejemplo, si los niños están emocionalmente seguros, si se sienten seguros, si se sienten a gusto con lo que está pasando. Dice que hemos visto muchas cosas positivas en los últimos 6 meses con las cuestiones emocionales y también viendo que ahorita con el aprendizaje de distancia está causando mucha ansiedad social para los niños. Entonces, haciendo eso una prioridad donde el aprendizaje social es algo que se hace prioridad, es algo importante y que ella ha hecho trabajo en esto y dice que es importante seguir buscando maneras de accesarlo, porque ahorita desafortunadamente no hay maneras de accesarlo, pero que es importante porque si tú valoras algo, lo quieres accesar. Entonces es algo que ella sugiere como idea que vamos a buscar la manera de accesarlo para los estudiantes. I hope I captured that right, Tanya.
Huh?
I hope I captured that good.
Yes, you did. And thank you so much, Tanya. So I really quickly wanted to talk about what La Comadre is doing and why we are spotlighting people like Tanya who are very important in education. La Comadre has been around, like I said, since 2015, and we have done what we can to put awareness out there and to inform our comadres and just talk about the issues in education. And this year, we're taking that further. We are actually spotlighting champions in education because they're people that we believe are good for communities and are good for children. And what we're doing is endorsing these candidates. And our endorsement will go to whoever supports kids of color, to whoever's doing the work to make sure that our parents are heard. And so we take that very seriously. We will support people. They don't need to be a Latina, they don't need to be a comadre, but they do need to be supportive of our children. And they do need to come with the skill set and the qualifications to lead and make sure that our kids get what they need. So we're super happy to support and endorse Tanya Ortiz Franklin for LA Unified School District 7, Area 7, in this November's election. And it's very important that we as comadres come together and do what we can to help these individuals that are running because we want the representation for our kids and our community. So we here at La Comadre have a statewide network. And what we can offer you, Tanya, is that we will share, that we will promote your story, we will promote your efforts and your candidacy, and that we will get teams of comadres to come out. And I know right now it's kind of a different type of campaign mode. So, but we will make phone calls for you and we will get comadres to help you with that.
Yeah.
And we will continue to elevate and talk about your name and your voice and your representation for kids in LA.
It's so important. You know, es muy importante para nosotras. Mira, nosotros hemos estado, la Comadre Network, hemos estado desde el noviembre, lo lanzamos el Día de los Muertos como un homenaje a nuestros antepasados. I do want to say that in English too, that we actually launched on Day of the Dead 2015 as an homage to our ancestors, that we are the voices that they're bringing forward. And you see the little hummingbird there. That's also a symbol of our ancestors, that the Mayas and the Aztecs. The hummingbird was the bird of was the God's messenger of hope and love for the community. And they were the ones who would share information and messages. And that's why we have accepted that as part of our La Comadre legacy and our brand, is that we want to be the messengers of hope and love for our kids. And we know that our kids have been invisible for a long time. And you see it still. You see that Latinas and Latinos are invisible in many conversations, including all kinds of other stuff that I'll talk about another day, not today. But I do want to share that we have decided that we want to do this to take it a step further of not just talking about the issues, because so many people do trust us. So many people do look to us individually and collectively like, hey, who should I vote for? Who is going to be good for us? And we're not all saying, like, the truth is, just because we are Latinas doesn't mean that we're only going to support Latinos. If there's a person who is about Latino kids and they happen to have a different DNA, we're going to be with them if they're about Latino kids. And if they're supporting issues that relate to Latino and Black children who we know are the ones who need the most support right now. That's just the reality. We're not calling, we're not here creating an illusion of this is just the facts. The facts are that Latino kids cannot read at grade level. There is not one county in the state of California, thank you, Education Trust West, for your majority report that you gave us 2-3 years ago, that proved and documented that there is not one county in every county, not one county in the entire state of California where Latino children can read and write or do math at grade level. And this is pre-pandemic, not one county. So we know that this is the truth. Our kids are entirely being left behind. And we also know that if they don't have a high quality education, they're going to fall through all kinds of cracks, and they're going to have, you know, unfortunate outcomes in terms of prison. They're going to be in prison at higher rates. They're not going to be able to have good jobs. We know that right now, 16% of Latinos, only 16% of Latinos can work from home. That means that way too many people, 84% of Latinos, have to leave their house to work, which is putting them at risk of COVID. And that's why we're seeing higher rates of COVID among Latinos and Blacks, because our people have to be out there working. They don't have the protection of being at home. And we know that all of this is connected. And that's why we've decided to do this. You know, we are not set up as a nonprofit. We are going to be doing this political action work as well, where we're going to be telling people the truth on the political side. And, you know, we've been attacked personally because we call things out, but that's okay. People have called me the charter chola, and I'm okay with that, right? But I'm saying, like, and it's not about charter schools, and it's not about traditional public schools. Yeah. I survived public schools. I love the schools that I went to. My mom worked at Middleton Elementary School for many, many years. I have lots of friends who teach there, but we also cannot protect systems that are not working for our kids. We have to be real. We have to be honest and transparent about who is going to be helping our children by all means necessary. And I'm going to really invoke Malcolm X with that. Whatever it takes for our kids to get what they need is what we need. And we have leaders like Tanya who are about it, who've been about it for a long, long time, doing the hard work, who came from these schools and who were saying, we deserve good representation like that. We deserve people who've gone through public schools. I love the fact that a lot of Latinos who are in elected office that they were able to go to private schools. That's great. It's a different experience to go through and survive LAUSD schools. I'm sorry, I'm going to be the one to say that. And I think,
and I love when you say that because it's true. Now translate all of that.
So, lo importante para mí es que nosotros como mujeres latinas, como esta red de la Comadre, hemos estado haciendo este trabajo bien importante de informar a nuestra comunidad tocante los temas educativos. Pero que este año, nosotros lanzamos el Día de los Muertos en el 2015 como un homenaje a nuestros antepasados. Y hablé del colibrí y el mensaje tan bonito que representa el colibrí para la comunidad latina, que son los mensajeros de los dioses aztecas y también de los dioses mayas. Pero nosotros pensamos que este año tenemos una responsabilidad más grande de solamente, y por eso no hemos hecho mucho trabajo en el cuestión política, porque estábamos buscando la manera de hacerlo bien. Pero ahora hemos decidido que vamos a estar abogando para ciertos candidatos que nosotros pensamos que van a ser campeones para la comunidad. Y entonces, es la primera vez que lo vamos a hacer. Y por eso estamos bien contentos que vamos a apoyar a Tanya en su candidatura para el Distrito Escolar de Los Ángeles. Vamos a hablar de Tanya, vamos a compartir su información, porque queremos que nuestro nombre esté aliado con Tanya, porque sabemos que Tanya representa nuestros valores. Y eso es importante que lo sepa todo el mundo, que mucha gente quizás no está contento con lo que está pasando, pero que hemos visto en el trabajo que ha hecho Tanya por mucho tiempo, que ha hecho el trabajo y que está comprometido con nuestra comunidad y que nuestros niños merecen a representantes como Tanya. Y es por eso que la vamos a apoyar. Vamos a hacer lo posible para apoyarla en su candidatura. La elección es en noviembre y vamos a tratar de continuar a apoyarla como podamos. Pero queremos que quede claro que las mujeres de la Comadre estamos con Tanya.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You lifted me up this Saturday morning. I really appreciate it. So thank you. We can absolutely use volunteers. Courtney knows. She's been a part of our texting campaign, and during the primary when we could, we met at her house a lot to go do door knocking. But obviously you're right. Things are different during this time. We will be doing phone calls. We will be doing texting. And so if folks are interested in supporting the campaign, we welcome that absolutely. I don't know if I can leave my website here with the group, or maybe we can post it on the Facebook Live. It's TanyaForLAUSD.com. Also on social media, Tanya for LAUSD. And I just want to thank you for lifting up the majority report from Ed Trust West a few years before they did the Black Minds Matter report. And it's important to know that we have a lot of work to do in our communities, and there is so much richness and assets and values of our communities, their history, their culture. And so, yes, we have a lot to do, particularly for our Black and Brown students to be successful in college. And we should be doing things with parents who have those rich stories and connections and deep supports of their students, and see the beauty and the value in each person's contribution to our public school system. And so I also just want to thank Courtney for joining us this Saturday, for being my comadre since, yes, we were 10 and 11 years old at President Avenue Elementary School, because you need people to not just lift you up on Saturday mornings, but to be there with you when you're crying and things are hard, because that happens. And she's in there.
Can I say something, Tanya? You know, I really want to celebrate your friendship. And, you know, I shared with you all earlier that my best friend, she died 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And I know the beauty of what comes out of LAUSD, right? Like the beauty is friendships like yours. The beauty is like friendships that we all get to carry for the rest of our lives. And that's why we want more for our kids. We want more for the Courtneys that are in the 6th grade right now. We want more for the Tanyas who are in the 6th grade right now. We want more for the Annalises who are in the 6th grade right now. And that's why we do what we do. We want our kids to be uplifted, and we know that education is the way.
One of my oldest friends I've had since I was in the 1st grade at Toluca Lake Elementary School. And it's funny because we both still do community works. And it's amazing to see. We get those friendships out of our elementary schools, right? Our middle schools. And, you know, we have to be able to support each other and support each other's kids in the future. And I love your guys' friendship as well. And Courtney, if you have anything else to say, jump in. I know you've been quiet, letting us just go on. But
I just want to say, make sure, vote, everyone vote, tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Yeah. It's so important. And Tanya is the best candidate on the ballot. So I just want to thank you in advance for getting out there and rocking the vote in November.
Okay. That's going to bring us to the end of this, La Comadre. We have some work to do to get Tanya there. Remember, everyone, LAUSD, District 7, Tanya for LAUSD. Let's make it happen. Thank you so much. Gracias todos para compartir en esta mañana con Tanya. Su website es Tanya for LAUSD. Y buenas almas. Y gracias a todos por venir ahora. We'll see you next time. We'll have another champion next week, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll see you next week with another champion. So Tanya, thank you.
Thank you. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Bye-bye.